A number of people have asked me what I think about cats, so I thought I would make this video to explain what I think about cats and how my feelings for cats have changed over the years. When I was small, I loved cats. I remember going outside to play and coming across many stray cats and cats that probably belonged to people but were out roaming. And I remember playing with them, loving, just being delighted by interacting with them. And I would bring these cats home. I would want to keep them. I'd want to feed them. They were fun to play with. They were entertaining. I loved to trigger their hunting instincts, by shaking a piece of something on the ground or whatever, a stick or my hand. And I enjoyed watching their pupils get large and seeing them crouch down and pounce on whatever. And just, they were fun. They were fun to play with, and I admired their appearance. I thought they looked very pretty, and I thought that they were very nimble and acrobatic. And I really was drawn to them and fascinated by them. And I thought they were really beautiful. And like I said, entertaining. So we had a number of cats growing up, and I loved them. I really thought I was an animal lover when I was small, and I loved cats, and I also loved dogs. Cats were different, and for a while, like I thought I loved both, but I think I always did prefer cats because they were more subdued and they were less intrusive. Like dogs, they'll get right up in your face and jump on you and be all hyper and lick you and stuff. But cats are not like that, and they're just more, they stay back, and they judge you from afar, and they take their time getting to know you, and they're just not as in your face, and they're not as hyper. They're not hyper at all in my experience. They're just very calm and gentle, and just a lot more polite, I guess. Like dogs just can be very rude and stick their faces right into you and just be obnoxious. And cats are just more elegant and refined and calm, and I like that. They're a lot more like people when you get to know them. They take their time getting to know you, kind of thing, and I like that. So when I left home at the age of 17, well, a bit later, a few years later, when I had my own place, somebody I knew was trying to get rid of their cat. So I decided to take their cat. And this was a cat that looked like this guy, big, black, beautiful cat with green eyes. His name was Zach. And I thought he was just gorgeous. And I remember having a lot of fun with Zach. He had his own personality and was just very entertaining, and was just a lot of fun. I enjoyed cuddling with him, and I loved the way that you could make cats purr. When you pet them and they'd purr, it would feel rewarding, like you knew that the affection you were giving to them was appreciated, and they would kind of push their bodies into you and show that they appreciated your affection and that you were giving them pleasure by, stroking them, and they liked that. And it made me feel nice because, yeah, I had this creature, I was living alone, and this was, he was great company, and I called him my baby at the time. But looking back, I remember when Zach, because he used to be an outdoor cat. He was an indoor cat with me. I kept him inside all the time. But he had worms. I remember once he was lying on my bed and I noticed these white, they looked like grains of rice coming out of his anus, and they were actually wiggling tapeworm segments that actually were falling on my bed, because he used to love to sleep on my bed. And at the time, I just picked up the worms and whatever, and I got him medicine and I treated him, and eventually the worms went away. But looking back, I just think of how disgusting that was. Just so gross. But at that time, I didn't think too much of it. I just, whatever. When I moved to Europe, so I was about 26 or something, 27. I was working at this place. I remember the guy that drove me to the airport when I was moving to Europe. I was bringing Zach with me because Zach was my baby, and I couldn't leave him behind. I loved him. And this was at a time in my life where I used to say I was never going to have kids ever. I hated kids, and I was an animal lover, and I was only going to have animals, and I was going to live alone for the rest of my life, never get married. I had all these ideas for how I was going to live the rest of my life. But anyway, so there I was, going to the airport, and the guy who drove me to the airport was a colleague of mine. His name was Marco, and he came from Argentina. And I don't know if it was just his opinion or if it was like a cultural thing, but he thought it was absolutely mental that I was bringing my cat to Europe. I remember him saying, like, well, first of all, this is a guy who, when I told him I didn't like kids, he just like shook his head, like with pity, and he told me he felt really bad for me. And he said that children are life, and if you don't like children, then you don't like life. And I remember thinking, like, you're just like, just shut up, you know. But he was really nice in other ways, and nice and kind enough to give me a lift to the airport. But he also had like negative feelings towards cats. I'm not sure how he felt about dogs. We never talked about dogs, but he just thought it was ridiculous that I was going through the trouble of bringing this cat overseas. And he's like, you know, what are you doing? Like, this is just a cat, you know? And I was like, no, he's my baby. And he just kind of shook his head and whatever. And I just remember thinking, like, you cold-hearted jerk, like, whatever. But, you know, it just makes me think about what I talked about in one of my previous videos. My recent videos, I was talking about opinion inertia, and that the more you encounter an opposing opinion, the easier it becomes to change your opinion. Because, you know, I had encountered his opinion, and prior to that, I had learned that my dad really hated cats. My grandfather really hated cats because they used to come and dig in the garden, and my dad loved birds. He loved to feed birds, and the cats were always coming around killing birds and stuff. So I grew up with people who loved cats, but there were also people who hated cats. And anyway, so Marco hated cats. He thought I was crazy. So I brought Zach over to Europe, and I remember after that, after I moved, Zach, he didn't adjust well at all to the move, and he started to display like signs of stress and stuff. He would lick. He had these bald patches developing on his paws because he was licking himself too much, and just I read something about cats having a sort of, what is it, like electromagnetic ability, like what is it, like cats can find their way home. They can kind of, there's something in their brains that can sense their position on the planet, and so they, you know, they navigate with this unexplained, like, I don't know too much about it, but they have this ability to know. Like, so Zach, when he was brought to another part of the world, I think that that part of his brain that, you know, was used to determining his location on the globe kind of got messed up, and he, I don't know if I'm right about this, it's just a theory, but like I was continuing to give him a lot of attention and everything, but he was just different, and he just wasn't dealing well with the situation. So probably about a year after I was in Europe with Zach, I became pregnant. My feelings about children changed because I had met Mr. Right. I had been in a lot of dysfunctional relationships, and for the first time in my life, I was with a healthy man, and I was allowing myself to receive love for the first time. And you know, and because I was with the right person, my feelings about creating another human being changed. I remember looking at him one day and telling him, you know what, I really do want to have your babies. And so we got pregnant, and well, I got pregnant, but so after my baby was born, I was continuing to feel that I loved Zach, but what happened is I was starting to have symptoms of asthma. Like I was starting to wheeze and feel really sick and have like serious allergies, and which is weird because I never had that before in my life. I never had asthma, and like it was getting really bad. So what I did is I went and had like an allergy test done, and they told me that I was allergic to a number of things I didn't know I was allergic to, like grass pollen and dust mites, as well as cats. And I was like, what are you talking about? I've had cats almost all my life. I've been around cats. I've never had these symptoms before. And it's only after I made my video about when new mothers start hating their dogs, I talked about the instinct that a lot of women have I'm talking about millions of women. If you go online and anyway, watch the video. I talk about women who suddenly start despising their dogs after they have their baby, or even when they're pregnant, and they start to hate the smell, the sounds of the dog, the behaviors of the dog. Everything just starts driving them crazy. And I really think this is nature's way. It's an instinct. It's nature's way of telling us to get rid of these animals and not allow them around us in our homes, around our babies, because they are a risk to have around. They're a risk to our young. They're a threat. So I really think it's like nature telling us to get rid of dogs. And likewise, I really think, because I found out that this is also very common, that women who never had allergies to cats, they develop them once they become pregnant or after they have their babies. This is very common. And I mean, I was really sick, and I remember trying to manage it with medication and stuff, but then being worried because like I was breastfeeding. I didn't like the idea of taking medicine, and it was starting to get really bad. Like I was having a hard time breathing. So eventually, what happened is a friend of ours took Zach and agreed to take care of him for us, and so anyway, I really think that was my body telling me to get the cat out of the house, because I talk a lot about dog attacks on my channel and how dogs target children and babies and attack them on a regular basis because of predatory instinct. It doesn't matter how they're raised. Anyway, I know that cats also, they scratch and they can attack babies and stuff. But not just that. When a woman is pregnant, she is advised to not clean litter boxes, to not come into contact with cat feces. And that's because cats transmit the toxoplasma gondii parasite. I didn't know about this until I became pregnant, and my midwife was telling me about, staying away from cat feces. And I was like, what, why? And so toxoplasmosis is something I talk about in that video about parasites, but it's pretty dangerous, because if a pregnant woman becomes infected with this parasite, and by the way, 1/3 of the world's population is infected with toxoplasmosis. They don't know it often. Often there are no symptoms, especially if you're like a healthy person. It can be dangerous when you have a compromised immune system. But like for healthy people, you could have it and not even know it, because there are like no symptoms. But yeah, up to 1/3 of the world's population have it. If you're pregnant, this can have really bad effects on the baby. The baby can, and they're still studying this. Like I talked about in that video about parasites, it's still not quite understood how it happens, but there is a link between toxoplasmosis and people having schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, aggressive behaviors, suicidal behaviors. They're still doing studies to try to understand it more, but there's like a link there that's really interesting and scary. It affects the brains of rats, causing rats to engage in very self-destructive behaviors by venturing out into places that smell like cat urine and becoming sexually aroused by that smell, which is something they would normally never do. Healthy rats would never do this. If they smell cat urine, they're going to run away from, they're going to hide from the smell and avoid those areas, because they understand that those areas are very risky, and, they could get killed by cats if they go there. But when they become infected with this parasite, they just venture out, because the parasite wants to get back into the body of the cat to complete its life cycle. So it will actually put itself in harm's way. Like the parasite overrides its natural instincts to avoid cats. And it's just fascinating how this parasite affects the brains of rats. But it seems there's evidence that it also affects the brains of humans by causing humans to engage in self-destructive behaviors, which I think is pretty frightening. I think that this is like bordering on like zombie apocalypse shit. Like people are losing, and we don't understand still. We don't quite understand what's going on, and we don't really know the extent to which we are affected by this. Like a third of the population has like a brain parasite. You know, and we don't really understand much about it. It's kind of scary to me. So I learned about that when I was pregnant, and at that point we had given Zach away. When Zach began to show signs of stress because of his internal compass being messed up, I think he started licking the fur off his tummy and his paws. He had bald patches, and we were concerned for him. So we thought maybe he would benefit from having a friend. We ended up getting a little kitten, and they played together for a while. It didn't really seem to make much difference though for Zach. And what happened is that kitten peed on our bed, soaked the mattress with stinking cat urine, and that really put us off having animals in the house. A couple of years before this happened, I remember visiting my sister, and at the time I was smoking these hand-rolled cigars called Backwoods Sweets. They were these lovely, sometimes I really miss smoking. They were these really lovely, they smelled almost like vanilla, like really good cigars. And I had them in my suitcase in the closet at her house where I was staying. And her cat urinated on my cigars. And it really pissed me off. And I remember that was also like a turning point. And it was kind of like, that was the time where I really was starting to have thoughts like, maybe, you know what, these animals shouldn't be living in our homes. Because that just really upset me. And so we were pet free. And since then, I have really changed the way I think about cats. I became more informed. I learned that not only do cats transmit toxoplasmosis, but they transmit a host of other diseases. There's cat scratch disease, and others like Pastorella. If you watch my video about Pastorella, you'll understand that you can develop all kinds of terrible complications like osteomyelitis, which is the infection of the bone that can lead to amputations and, crippling disfigurements and stuff. It can lead to meningitis and other terrible things that can have lifelong complications. You can get salmonella from cats. You can get scabies, which are a parasite of the skin. There's ringworm you can catch from cats. I made a video about how virtually all dogs are infested with worms to some degree, and in that video I talked about the terrible symptoms of being infected by these parasites like toxocara, roundworms, hookworms. These are all parasites that you can catch from cats as well. Their eggs are present in cat feces, which, like in dog feces, those eggs can survive in the environment for months or even years, and roundworm can make you go blind. It's terrible. If you're concerned about dog poop, you should be equally concerned about cat poop. I got really upset when we moved into this house we have now. The previous owners had a big pile of gravel in the back that my kids wanted to play in, and it would have been a lot of fun for them to play in, but the cats were using it as a toilet, and my dog used to go and eat the cat shit out of the gravel pile like it was a delicacy, just disgusting, and I didn't want my kids catching toxoplasmosis, so it's just unfortunate. You can also catch protozoal infections from cats like cryptosporidiosis and giardiasis. Can't talk. These, especially if you have a compromised immune system, not good. And of course, there's also rabies that can be transmitted by cats. Although it's rare, you can also catch the plague from cats. I talked in my videos on this channel about how my feelings for dogs changed when I got pregnant. And, suddenly I began to see them for what they are. I began to see how gross and disgusting they actually are. Well, the same thing happened with cats. I suddenly became aware, like really aware, because I always knew it, but it's like all of a sudden it's like a veil was lifted and I saw what was right in front of me all along, that cats dig in their litter boxes. When they dig in their litter boxes, their paws come into contact with urine and with feces. Even though you can't see it, there are traces left on their paws after they go into their litter boxes. They have traces of piss and shit on their paws, and then they walk all over the house and they go onto your bed and onto your counter in the kitchen, leaving behind traces of bacteria. It's absolutely disgusting. I never really saw it before, but I only did after I became pregnant. And again, I believe this is nature's way of telling us that these animals should not be in our homes. I don't see cats as being as big a threat to humans as dogs, because I'm not aware of any babies or children who have been killed by cats, and yet I hear about kids being attacked, killed by dogs on a very regular basis. And cats don't chase you down the street, they don't harass you. If you walk into an alley, or you're walking down the street and you see some stray cats, you don't fear for your safety. You don't fear for your life. They're not going to gang up and, attack you. But if you look at cats' behavior, they kill even if they are not hungry. They have these instincts to kill animals. And this is something I also didn't realize until later in life. I'm going to share an article with you. I'll put the link in the description, called 8 Ways Domestic Cats Are a Serious Threat to Nature. And it talks about how cats are just killing so many animals. And as someone who still has a lot of respect and admiration for wild animals, and I, like my dad, I love birds. I love to bird watch. I love the sound of birds. And even in my lifetime, I'm seeing a difference. Like, I remember going out when I was a kid and just listening to a huge variety of songbirds and just seeing all these different birds. And I notice a drop in the number and the types of birds that I see around. I'm going to share another article too, called Cats Are the Number One Killer of Birds in Canada. And it talks about how conservationists are urging owners to keep cats indoors and leashed when outdoors, because when you allow your cat to roam, it's just out there killing animals. And they say the average cat kills, I think it's 2 animals a week. But all these cats out there, it says that keeping your cats inside could help save 200 million birds each year in Canada alone. Canada's wild bird populations are estimated to have declined about 12% in the last 40 years, with some populations decreasing by over 95%. It says globally, the number of at-risk bird species has increased from 47 to 87 in just 14 years. And it says that the causes for the decline are complex, but cat predation introduces a significant additional pressure to populations that are already facing challenges. So, if you do have a cat, please keep it inside, because, like they explain in the article here about the 8 ways domestic cats are a serious threat to nature, especially if you live on an island such as Australia or New Zealand, where wild animals evolved without the presence of cats. So they did not develop the ability to fly in some cases, and they are very at risk. It says that 33 modern bird, mammal, and reptile extinctions are because of cats. In New Zealand and Australia now, the governments are taking measures to eradicate cats. They're culling cats, and they're looking into drones and genetic biocontrol and stuff. And I know that there are a lot of people who are angry and upset about this. I think it is a very sensible thing to do to protect these amazing, unique animals it makes no sense to sit back and watch them be destroyed by cats. It's a mistake we made by bringing them there, but we have to correct this mistake. And, the animals, the native animals living on these islands, they deserve better than to be wiped out. And it's just a terrible situation. In the US as well, they say here that cats kill as many as 4 billion birds and 22 billion small mammals each year. And, cats reproduce like rabbits. I'm sorry, cat lovers, but cats are vermin. They are causing a lot of problems. And so for that reason, I think we need to cull them. And yeah. And another reason, man, this is going on longer than I thought it would. I'm just going to say one more thing, that as a vegan, I think it makes no sense at all to have a cat because cats are obligate carnivores. I have read that there are some cats that seem to thrive on plant-based diets, but that there are a lot of cats that do not thrive. They get sick. They require meat, apparently. So, like I said in a previous video, cats and dogs are responsible for up to 30% of meat environmental impact in the United States. So if you don't know, the animal agriculture, the meat industry is causing a lot of problems. It is in large part responsible for climate change and environmental destruction, clear cutting of rainforests. I could go on and on about that. Just check out the film Cowspiracy on Netflix. I'll put a link in the description where you can read about all the devastating environmental impacts of the meat industry, animal agriculture in general. So if you have a cat, as a vegan, it makes absolutely no sense. First of all, to save the life of one animal while condemning countless other animals to torture and death just so you can feed that one animal. Like, it makes no sense to support the meat industry, because what about the lives of all of the fish and chicken and turkeys and whatever goes into the making of pet food? Where's your compassion for them? You're actually contributing to more suffering by owning a carnivore and buying it food. So if you truly care about animals, and if you care about the environment, you would wash your hands of cat ownership. It makes no sense at all. I'm sure I'm going to come up with more things. We'll have a discussion in the comments. I'm sure that I'm going to lose a ton of subscribers after I upload this video. But my channel, I didn't create this channel to get subscribers. The purpose of this channel is to raise awareness and to put out the truth about dogs primarily, but cats and whatever. This is going to be probably the last video I make about cats. I know I mentioned somewhere on my channel that I was thinking of creating a feline aversion channel. I probably won't be doing this just because I'm already trying to maintain 2 channels, and just doing that is enough work for me. So if any of you want to create a feline aversion channel, I would subscribe. That would be great. And, if you find yourself feeling defensive after watching this and upset, just please try to think about the things that we see in dog lovers, the way they get upset when we confront them with facts that they don't like to hear about dogs. Just keep that in mind and ask yourself if maybe you're doing the same thing. It's very possible. And so thank you for watching, and I look forward to the discussions in the comments. All right, guys, take care, and remember, the future is dog free, and I'm thinking it's probably cat free too. See ya.